So I'd ask for a motion to accept the agenda and the consent agenda. Have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Patron comments. Do we have some? Okay. Any school district patron may present information to the board at this time. Presentations will be limited to no more than 5 minutes. The board will not take action on any issue not included on the published agenda. However, all comments will be taken into consideration by the Board of Education. Patrons are requested not to discuss individual faculty, staff, or students. Patrons are reminded that this is a public forum, and comments relative to individuals could result in litigation. However, any patron may request to meet with the board in executive session. No response will be given by the board at this time. Nobody signed up, but is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak? Jan?
Because I have found the workshops to be very interesting and give people who attend or now watch an insight into what it is to be a school board member, how much work goes into it, how many issues are discussed. But you all did it at the last workshop. So I just want to thank you for doing that. I feel that openness is always a better thing, and I'm usually here shaking my finger, but in this case, I just want to thank you for putting online the workshops. Thank you.
You're welcome. Takes us to reports, audit presentation.
Yeah, we're joined by Brian Eckhoff with Westbrook and Company, and he is going to, he led our audit effort this year for the last school year's financials, and he's here to give us a rundown tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Brian Eckhoff with Westbrook. We recently completed your audit. We're going to do a brief overview of the financial statements. If you have questions while I'm going through it, don't hesitate to stop me. We can kind of address them as we're going. So this is the financial statement audit. So the first slide will be the independent auditor's report, and you'll see that it says that it is presented fairly. So this is a clean audited opinion or a good audit report, so it's exactly what you want to see on your audited financial statements. The next slide will be the statement of activities. This is kind of a different financial statement because it has your revenues through the middle of the page. Your expenditures are on the left with a net cost on the right-hand side. The one that we usually focus on here is food service, and it's usually because food service is a loser and it costs the district money. However, with food service being 100% free this year, as in last year, you actually made money on food service. So you can see in the red box, it shows that food service actually had an increase in fund balance of about $276,000. That's standard for most districts given the 100% free. However, not standard for you guys in historical data. You guys are normally losing money on food service like every other school district. So you'll see next year when I come, there will be a loss on food service because it's no longer 100% free. So the next slide will be the balance sheet. You can see as of June 30th, we had around $30 million in assets between the four funds. A special revenue fund, that's your teacher's fund. Districts normally take that down to zero and leave it at a zero fund balance, so that's pretty standard. At the bottom of the screen, you can see the various fund balances, and the next slide is actually going to give you the breakdown of those. Your debt service fund is always shown as restricted because that has to be restricted by outside sources to pay debt service funds. Your general fund has some professional development, about $6,300 that wasn't spent during the year that will have to be spent on professional development this year. And then it has some scholarship money that's restricted by outside sources. Moving down, you can see the committed construction projects. Those are the projects that the board had approved prior to June 30th but had not been paid yet. That'd be phase 6 on the high school, the leadership center, and then athletic complex were the three big ones. And then moving down, you can see the assigned. Your food service, DESE tells you if you actually make money on food service, you're required to spend that money on future food service expenditures. And you can see that you guys have a food service balance. As you start to lose money on food service going forward, this balance will dwindle and we'll be fine. If you continue to make money on food service, you'll have to come up with a plan to spend that down. DESE doesn't want you to build a food service balance. Student activities, that's your clubs and organizations. And then your remaining fund balance in general fund of 11, almost 12 million is always unassigned. That's for your day-to-day operations of the district. Next slide is going to be your revenues and expenditures. You can see the district actually had, down in the red box, a decrease in fund balance this year, mainly the capital projects fund, so that is due to improving your district overall. If you look at the operating funds of the general and the special revenue fund, it actually had an increase of about 1.1 million. You also had an increase in your debt service fund this year of about 600,000. And when you see the debt payments coming up in a couple of slides, you'll know why, because you had a couple of years of big payments coming up. So overall, a good year for the district financially, just with the capital projects expenditures. The next slide is a summary of your debt. We've got around 46 million in debt between the general obligation bonds and the direct borrowings. The direct borrowings are all technology equipment that has been purchased through capital leases, things like that. So you can see that 46 million and 44.3 million is due this year. The next slide is going to show you the bond payments for the next 7 years, I believe it is. And you can see that the next 2 years are pretty sizable. We got 9.1 and then 6.1. So you can see that why we're building that balance in the fund balance for debt service, because it'll take care of these payments. The next slide will be the remaining 2 years on the direct borrowings, and then all those technology purchases will be paid off. The next slide is going to be a 5-year comparison of your revenues. Something to highlight here, it doesn't look like a whole lot, but if you look at the fourth chart, the federal revenues, you can see that federal revenues went from 4% up to 7% the last couple of years and then down to 6% this year. That's all your COVID dollars. Percentage-wise, it doesn't look like a whole lot, but if you look up above, your federal revenues went from 2.2 million to 4.4, so it basically doubled. So that's all those COVID dollars coming through, so those will not be coming through going forward. So just as something to recognize there. And then you can see that your local dollars went up. That was actually increase in interest rates as well as some taxes. So the next slide is going to be the same comparison, but for expenditures. Salaries and benefits for you guys have always hovered around that 80% mark, similar to other districts your guys' size, so that's pretty normal. Your expenditures were higher this year due to principal payments and capital outlay, so when you look at the increase this year of total expenditures to last year, that's the cause of it. The next slide is going to be a 5-year comparison of reserve ratio and average daily attendance. Reserve ratio, you're at 26%. We consider this a healthy, financially stable school district. And your average daily attendance is pretty flat. It's actually gone down a little bit this year, about 41, almost 4,200. So something to keep an eye on and make sure it goes back up since we're back on paying on the highest of 3 years. While we're here, we look at state statutes. We look at bidding, things like that on your budget as well to see if there's any violation of state statutes. And on the next slide, you'll see that it says it is fairly stated. So we did not note any violations in any of those areas. And then also while we're here, we look at internal control. We don't give an opinion on internal control, but if we come across anything while we're doing our analysis of internal control, we bring it to your attention. We use it in our risk assessment area to determine where we're going to spend additional time, things like that. And you can see on this slide, it says we didn't identify any deficiencies in internal control. So another good report. The next slide is going to summarize your federal programs side of things. You have over $750,000 worth of federal expenditures, so you're required to have a uniform guidance audit, also known as a single audit. Means that we spend additional time on your federal expenditures. And you can see in the red box on the bottom, it says we did not identify any deficiencies. So a clean audit for the federal program side as well. And the next slide is actually going to give you the summary of what we tested. So unmodified means clean opinion or good audit report. And then no all the way down means there's no comments, no recommendations, no findings. Towards the bottom of the page, the two areas where we did all of our testing were the special education cluster and the education stabilization fund. So that is where we did all of our testing of expenditures. And then the very bottom one, did you qualify as a low-risk auditee? You did not. Don't take that as you're a high-risk auditee. When they wrote uniform guidance, they wrote it for accrual basis financial statements, and 99% of the school districts in the state of Missouri are cash basis financial statements, so you cannot qualify as a low-risk auditee. It just means that we have to audit a higher percentage of your federal programs. You do not want to switch to accrual basis financial statements. Just know we'll continue to audit a higher percentage. So, and then the next slide is going to say none and none because there were no recommendations on the federal side of the audit. So basically as clean as you can get, no recommendations, no comments, no findings. A good year financially for the district as well. So questions for me?
So on page 16, when you say you went through the full cluster, the special education cluster, the stabilization fund, you pick those at random each year, you do different ones and just go through?
Yes, so for the federal program audit, we have to audit food service once every 3 years. And we also have to get 40% coverage out of, so what we do is we look at all your federal expenditures, put it on a chart, it's called the CFA, Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Awards. And then Kelly Barber on my team is the one that actually did your work. She goes through and in order to get 40% coverage, she picks programs to get her 40%. But then also, the ESSER dollars that you're talking about, they are automatically have to be audited because they're considered high risk because they're new. So we had to do those, and in order to get our 40% coverage, she chose special education because we had done food service once in the last 3 years already.
Okay.
So, and they switch every few years. Obviously, since we didn't have ESSER, you know, we did other things in prior years.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
good news. Brings us to Metro pay comparisons.
Yeah, this is the second year in a row that we have done this comparison. Dr. Gooch is going to lead this. What you see, so Grain Valley's values are always in red, and you'll see a ranking, and then in parentheses, the number in parentheses is where our ranking was a year ago. So this is, like I said, the second year in a row that we have done this. So I'll let Dr. Gooch kind of walk us through this and take any questions after he presents.
So as you can, I do apologize. So when you scan this in, the red's going to be a little bit difficult to see. But what we're gonna see is in a lot of areas throughout these comparisons. The school district, we did a pretty good influx of money this past year, but we talked about this last time. We were shooting at a blind number because we didn't know what everybody else was going to do. I didn't have those discussions with the districts across the metro. So we did our best that we could financially, and you can see that we were able to, in some cases, close a few gaps, and then in other cases, as we increased the pay for some of our staff, for all of our staff, so did the other area school districts for the positions. And so you can take a look here and see that actually for us, for example, the very first one in custodian, this year we ranked 10th out of the Metro's group. Last year we were 12th. So in this case, we did raise 2 different steps. But in a few others, if we wanted to scroll down, I'll go down to the next page. For paraprofessionals, we added some money to it, and I'm going to look more on the tier 2 one on this one. That's where a big majority, actually almost all of our paras fall in tier 2. And we infused additional funding into that one. We made that salary higher, and we went from 7th to 13th. So we put more money into it to try to become more competitive, and the other school districts in the metro dwarfed us. So it just shows that we have a lot of groundwork to make up in that regard as well. Substitute teacher pay, we were able to find ourselves right in the middle of the metro, which is what we're trying to strive to do financially, and that's where we were able to land there. I'm going to skip forward to certified. If you have, they're all in here. I don't know if you want me to address every one of them one at a time. If you have some specific ones, we can spend some time on that. But I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna move forward. Pardon the scrolling here if you're watching from the audience. I'm going to move to the teacher. So here in teacher pay, our base last year, we were at 14th. We added $1,500 to the teacher base, which raised us up to 11th. So in this, at our base teacher pay, we were able to go up 3 steps, which is a good start. We do obviously still have some things to do there. In master's step 10, the additional funding that we put to the base as it trickles down to a teacher who has their master's degree on step 10, the additional money did not move the needle in that area, so we stayed at 13th. Moving down towards the longevity of teachers, the masters at step 15, we really, I mean, you can see we did take a very small step backwards, but we went from 10th to 11th, so it didn't really move the needle much there at masters 15, and then the one that is the one where we decreased the most here was in masters, or max, I'm sorry, our max. So if you are maxed out in our salary schedule, which goes to step 30, and but anyway, this is the maximum degrees that someone could have. So in this case, it could be a person who has a specialist degree, or this could be a person who has a master's plus a lot of additional extra hours, graduate level hours, and then they are in their 20th year. Last year we were at 10th, and because the way our salary schedule is built, we fell behind even further there. This is obviously the discussion that we've had at length, and we are working this school year to hopefully fix this issue by making some modifications to our salary schedule in the way that we have, percentages and the way that the salary schedule works with, I'm working with myself and Mr. Hooper, as well as having discussions with other school districts who have different salary schedule percentages from year to year. I'm having those discussions right now so we can bring forward later in the school year a more competitive salary schedule, not only for our first year teachers, obviously, but for everybody, for us to become more competitive. Because as you can see now, we've become a little bit more competitive with our first year teacher pay, but we become less competitive the longer you're here. And so that's because the way our salary schedule is built. So we are working to fix that this year in creating a new salary schedule that will be competitive at the front end and also competitive in the middle and in the back. And then I'll just skip forward and I'll highlight just a very few here of the administration group. We did infuse for the first time in over a decade some administration salary increases, and we infused $5,000 to the base pay of the administration. And you can tell in some of these areas we didn't touch the needle pretty much at all. We were at the bottom in pretty much every category, and we remain at the bottom in pretty much most categories. There are a few assistant principals where we're a little bit more in that 10, 11 range, but for the most part, we're down towards the bottom. So you can see, I'll just give you, for example, we infused the $5,000 and it didn't move the needle on high school or middle school principal, as well as other administration positions. So at this time, I'll take any questions that you have regarding our comparisons, what we're doing. I mean, this is step one in a very long process for us to become more competitive with all of our salaries. This is for classified, for certified, and for administration. I mean, we have to obviously now. I don't know what it's going to take for us to become more competitive. How much additional money that's going to cost? That's something I don't have yet. So if you have the question of what's it going to take, how much is it going to cost for us to put ourselves in the middle of all these? Those are numbers I don't know yet, but those are numbers I will work to bring you guys at a later time.
Yeah, and I want to jump on that, because what we want to try to do, even at the November meeting, is to come back with the existing salary schedules, what it would cost us to do what we want to do. So our commitment in our long-range goal is be in the top half
Right.
with, you know, similar with metro school districts. So in order to be in the top half, you got to hit a little, you got to target above the mid mark, because as we see, we add money, everybody else adds money. It's a competitive race.
And honestly, I can attempt to have those conversations with other school districts, but they don't know at the time either. Hey, you know, as I'm trying to determine if I want to get us to 7th and I want us to start next year, be in 7th place, right? If I ask them, how much are you going to infuse in your cook, for example, they don't know that a dollar amount right now either. So we really are always just throwing a dart. But we definitely want to strive to become a district that is in the middle. And for us to do that, like Dr. Welly said, we'll bring forward some, you know, the recommendation of how much that's going to cost us, but know that we're always kind of shooting at this a little blind, because other school districts don't tell me in November what they're adding to their base of all of their non-certified, certified, and so on.
The second wave of those calculations will be once we have a new once we've rebuilt the salary schedule, then we'll reprice it. And I mean, I don't know that there's any way around the conclusion that a new salary schedule is going to be more expensive than the existing salary schedule.
Absolutely.
So in November, we're going to price the existing salary schedule to be competitive, knowing that there's going to be an upcharge on a revised salary schedule. But what that'll do for us moving forward, because we don't know what revenues are for the following year, those kinds of things, the most important thing is to rework the salary schedule. Once we get it fixed, then we can dial it to whatever revenues we know we're going to be able to generate for next year. So it'll be a multi-stage thing, but we don't want to wait too much longer to start to put a price tag on correcting what you see here. So our goal is to come back in 4 weeks with dollar signs on this of what it would cost us to modify what we know today.
What is the time frame on the new salary schedule?
Do you have a time frame?
I can say that by November it wouldn't probably happen. I've been in conversations that I've had with people from other school districts. I'm not dodging your question. I'll answer it. I've got good resources. People are saying, hey, here's a good organization to contact. We have some software programming that can help us, as well as some other people who have done this process at length. And so I am getting ready to reach out to the most recent name that I was given. So to answer your question, I would like to say that I'm going to work hard to bring this back to you guys hopefully by the end of the calendar year. So my goal is to try to get this to you by December.
That's pretty aggressive.
I'm going to try, and it all depends on how. If I've got the numbers associated with everything for next month, then what I can do is then in turn take our salary schedule and work with Mr. Hooper, the wizard of Excel, and we will start to change the percentages of steps, right? So if it's, first 5 years, if the step increases 2%, then it goes to 2.25, 2.5, things like that. We can start to mess with it to where we identify now how are we competitively with our neighboring school districts, and then hopefully we find something based off of what we're going to do and work with this other resource and hopefully be able to present something, at least a rough draft to you by the end of the year.
So you mentioned the software, because I know, several months ago we had, purchased the software. We had agreed to fund the software purchase. Did that ended up just being one of the pieces that we needed to work through this?
It's the money piece to it that's going to help us be able to look even more globally. What I'm trying to do is identify numbers, and what it's allowing me to do is to find the numbers without having to make lots of phone calls. So in order for me to be able to identify how much starting teacher pay is in other school districts outside of the metro, we want to be, that I feel like we need to compare ourselves to. It's just an opportunity for me in one place to go and find the numbers that I need, so I don't have to make
'Cause it has
17 different phone calls.
it has every salary. It has every teacher in the system.
It has every teacher in the state in there, every everybody who is reported in core data is in there. What it doesn't have is every school district's salary schedules, which is, there are some, but unfortunately, because that doesn't have everyone's salary schedule, then I have to start looking for specific people and specific amounts, and that's what's taking a little bit of time, but it's very helpful just simply because, again, there's a lot of teachers and a lot of staff across the state of Missouri whose names are in there where I can find out their salary, and I can use that as a comparative thing for us, so. It's helpful, it's just, it's me getting savvy enough and quick enough to be able to work through it. And I love it because I don't have to, like I said, I don't have to make phone calls. It's hard enough to do this Metro comparison by making all of these phone calls. So when I'm trying to look at, where a teacher with master's level 15 is, that's very, very specific target for us, but that's a hard conversation to have with the other assistant superintendents across the metro. Can you tell me where a teacher is who is in their 10th year on salary, on this column? It's a whole lot nicer for me to be able to go and identify somebody, and I can find their name and how many years they've worked and so on through the software.
When we look at these things, so like, I assume we still have para positions open for our district. I'm not sure if all of those were filled or not. But when we look at different positions and what's filled and what's not filled, like in comparison to substitute pay, where we were able to get up into the middle of the pack, but I think depending on how many hours a para is paid a day, that they are getting paid less than what a substitute would, and this would be considered a full-time employee. And then like when we look at, in another example would be like looking at middle school assistant principals and high school assistant principals, same salary schedule, but I believe the contracts are different because I think high school has a ton more supervision than what middle school typically does. And so when we look at those things, I think numbers talk a lot.
Sure.
But when we are looking at a comprehensive idea as to where we rank, like it looks like we're paying our paras less than we're paying substitutes, and that's, I think, tough. So I'm just wondering, how do we look across positions to make sure we're comparable in all areas in a comprehensive manner? Like, I don't know what goes into that, I guess. I'm not sure how that's viewed.
Well,
And that's a large question. I'm trying to pick out two kind of comparison examples to show, like, it's really tough to look at these and then just look at them in isolation. But obviously, we need all of these positions to make our district work, so.
sure, and again, for us I'll specifically speak to the para one. We, again, the vast majority of our paras are in tier 2. So, I mean, when you take the $15.32 an hour and you multiply that out over a day, it is more than a substitute teacher, but.
Are they paid for 7 hours or are they paid for 8 hours?
7.5, is that 7?
So that's $107.
So you're right, it is less, so.
So like, I know that we have poached some of our substitutes to be paras, as we should. We need full-time staff.
Sure.
And I'm not saying, I want everybody to get paid. If we can give everybody all the money, let's do it. But then sometimes a discrepancy as to those different positions I find intriguing and wonder where that comes from. Or like, that would make sense as to why we're in the middle of the pack for substitutes, but on tier 2 for paras, it's better to be a substitute
Sure.
than to show up every day.
I think once we hit our target across the board and all those schedules, I think that's step one. And then you look to see, okay, did we correct for some other issues? And if we didn't, we could still tweak
Right.
those. But
There's
we
just a
kind of
lot
hope
to
that by
this story.
comparing ourselves with the Metro, that if you're in the top half or the top third across the board, that those things should kind of shake out. But I think it's worth looking cross category.
And your other comment about like contract length for assistant principals, for example, it's funny you mentioned that because that was a conversation that was had today about when we're looking at this and we're talking about making increases, or if I'll recommend to do a certain amount for one and maybe a certain amount for the other, and let's say another $5,000 hypothetically, then if, then there's questions from, well, if I'm a 10 and a half month employee, or they're a 10 month, or if I'm 11 and they're 10 and a half. And so, one of the things that, I am gonna now look into is reaching back out to, because this is not in the software, is contract length, and having some conversations with my contacts about the length of contracts for various positions. So
Yeah, 'cause that makes
when
a
you
big
mentioned that
difference.
as an example, it was kind of funny because that is true. That was truly discussed today. So you are in there. Get out.
The other question that I would have, if we're truly going to be competitive, we can't just look at salaries. So when you start talking to other school districts, do you look at, or are you asking how much do they pay towards insurance, and what other benefits are they building into those packages? Because Blue Springs may pay more than us, but the employee has to pay more insurance. So then it really becomes, so do you have access to that kind of information as well?
Not without having conversations about it. No, that's not listed in there, out there anywhere specific, unless I'm reaching out to the individual administrator over that type of stuff. I know of a small handful of them, those who are within our consortium. I know what their benefits look like as well. That could be something that I could easily ask is, what do you pay for health insurance too? Especially if I'm gonna call my contacts and say, all right, give me real quick, what's your assistant principal for the elementary's contract and so on. They've all been pretty gracious to do that. And between myself and Ms. Frederick, we can knock that out too pretty easily, just to say, all right, your health insurance benefit, what do you pay each month, and what is your staff's contribution if they want to buy up to a PPO or something like that. I can easily have those discussions too, as part of additional research, so.
I know the salary schedule, and Mr. Porter's brought it up, and we're trying to fix that, but, maybe Lee Summit looks better starting salary until you start really digging in. So maybe we're not as far off if you consider the comprehensive packet as the salary alone shows.
Sure.
Sometimes. Any other questions?
On the para piece. So I'm assuming that they're paid below minimum wage because they get a benefit package. Is that correct?
Who's paid below minimum wage?
The minimum wage for Missouri is $12 an hour.
Who's paid below minimum wage?
The para, tier 1.
Yeah. I don't know that do we have any active tier 1 paras? I don't think we do.
Right now we don't, but we do have several
And
open.
it would all be, if somebody hired at a tier 1, it means that they don't fully meet the qualifications for the role, so their place there is kind of an incentive to finish whatever they need to be certified. So the goal is actually to not have anybody at tier 1.
Okay.
So we could raise it, and we'll probably raise it a little bit, but it's pretty irrelevant overall. It's not what's drawing people in. When we advertise a job, we're advertising the tier 2 rate.
Because I was just noticing, like, the state average, like any of the metro areas are below our state average when it came to paras. It's like $18.67 plus benefits for them. So it was just kind of interesting to see
That's the state average for para?
$18.67.
Wow.
So that's why I was just like, Grandview's up there. But like our metro area does not meet what the statewide pay is.
That's, thank you for sharing that number. I thought you would, as a numbers person. Yeah, like that's a number I've never heard, so I'm surprised I've not heard that statement before as well, so.
Anything else?
Just, I guess to follow up on Julie's statement about the minimum wage, if we did have someone come in, we can't pay them below minimum wage, correct? You can.
We can. It doesn't look good, but we can.
Can you elaborate on why?
Can you elaborate on why? I'll let you.
I just know since we're a government entity, we don't fall under the minimum wage requirement. We can pay below minimum wage because we're basically just a government entity.
But we're not
For worse.
But we're not going to. moving forward. I mean, for the record, like, that's not the goal.
Thank you for that.
Anything else? Thanks, Nick. Takes us to the superintendent's report.
Highlights from our report this month: we received a $10,000 grant for Grow Your Own program. This is for us to work with students who are maybe interested in being teachers. So we can use this grant funds for dual credit courses for a course that they take as aspiring teachers. They can earn college scholarships from us through this money, and we can pay them internship stipends if they do, say, a summer school internship with us working in a classroom. So we also have a local donor who is providing a considerable amount of funds towards this to kind of help us launch this. So we'll have more details on this. This is a developing story, but we have a high school course underway this year that we will be highlighting at some point during the school year and really drawing attention to growing our own teachers. We want our kids to see themselves as teachers potentially, and go off and get trained and come back and teach for us. So we're excited about that. Our community survey through Excellence K-12 is underway, so those calls are happening. We have our online survey for people who are interested in participating, because certainly not everybody's going to get a phone call. And the other thing I want to highlight is our Bright Futures Luncheon is November 14th at noon at the Community Center. We're teaming up with the Green Valley Chamber of Commerce for a joint luncheon on that day. This is our 10th anniversary, so Bright Futures is 10 years old, and we're going to have a little bit of a birthday party. So November 14th, we hope to see everybody there. And also, I just want to remind the board that we'd kind of set tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock for kind of some informal tours of a couple of the schools. So anybody on the board that is available, we'll start out at South Middle School tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. and we'll spend a little time in 2 to 3 schools tomorrow morning, probably wrapped up around noon. So just come by and see us. Any questions on the main report?
I didn't have any questions on that. I did have some questions on Dr. Carrie Reich's portion, but I'm not sure if I'll have to ask those later.
You can ask that of Dr.
Okay,
Dr.
perfect. So on the signs of suicide portion, it just seems like the high school, the numbers went up pretty dramatically, and it seems like from 2021 to 22 they went up quite a bit. From 22 to 23 they went up quite a bit. Is there something that, is it just that we're doing a better job looking for it? Is there something that is making that trend go up?
I mean, I think schools around the nation are feeling this, just needing to meet social and emotional needs of students. So through these, students are able to identify themselves or a friend. And I think also these students who hit high school age have done this program since 6th grade. So by the time they hit high school, there's such familiarity with the program, and they know what to look out for in their friends. And we just get an increasing number of referrals every year. I will say that of those referrals, very few of them turn out to be high risk, but even for the handful that we get, we're very thankful for. So it does, even though we've had the program a long time, we feel like it's continuing to be really effective, and that kids take it seriously and do what they're supposed to do to help out one another.
There wasn't one particular reason for referrals that spiked that the group noticed this year. I didn't hear that from the group, but I didn't know if you had heard that there was anything that was a new kind of alarm bell this year.
I didn't. Between our new family school liaison and some of our community partner counseling organizations, we continue to bring in more help every year that are volunteers to help out that day. So it doesn't necessarily take any more time. We just get to hit a greater number of students. And like I said, we still are seeing it as very beneficial and working well.
We had our counseling advisory committee just this past Monday, and SOS was one of the things that they actually talked about and reported those numbers. And there was no significant event that they reported at our meeting on Monday that they thought was indicative of that, other than the culture that they have created through the continued implementation of that curriculum, because they get it from sixth to eighth graders through. So they had talked about the increase in the need and the demands of the buildings, but didn't necessarily have a pulse on that, other than they talked about in 20 was hybrid virtual. And so we had quite a few virtual students, so that was the reason that number was so low. And so as we have crept back up to more capacity, that they had noticed that, so they had pointed out those COVID years with how many things, but definitely noticed that and didn't have any real explanation for it. Just from our Monday meeting. Good question, good time.
Right.
You might have answered this already. I see the North Middle and South Middle and the high school. Are there elementary school concerns with kids for the SOS program?
So our counselors at the elementary level push in to give lessons. We don't have necessarily a suicide prevention program at the elementary, but they certainly do a lot of character lessons that develop, what to do when you feel angry, what to do if you feel depressed, including if you see a friend that you're worried about. It's just a little bit different model, where it's more of a push-in model with the counselors on a monthly basis that go in and teach lessons and get feedback from the students, whereas 612 is a little more by request, you might say, other than our SROS program, which is where they do train all teachers to teach this curriculum and then make a whole team of counselors available for this particular day. So I do think they address a lot of the what to do when you feel sad, and just use a little bit different, softer language, and teach those in lessons throughout the entirety of the school year, and certainly take peer referrals and do some small group work and all the good things. We just don't necessarily roll out a curriculum about suicide until sixth grade. We just developmentally appropriate.
Are those numbers calculated? I mean, is there a chart on the elementary school of how many students require some additional help, mental help, or concerns?
I mean, our counselors keep a lot of detailed information. I know
Okay.
you could
So,
speak very
and I was gonna
closely
say,
to-
they shared different numbers. So this, in correlation with SOS, this is one day, one curriculum, one program, and that was a result from that one day. And that is age appropriate for 6 through 12, and it's not, and required by the state, but not age appropriate for our K through 5. So the K through 5, there are still those concerns, 100% for students in those severe needs. They have different data that they shared with us on Monday that says this is this many that we have done in risk assessments, in suicide assessments, in.
So our district does have that data, it's just not.
It does, it just wasn't presented in this.
okay.
So it's not, so since they didn't do the suicide program specifically, it's not presented here, but they had presented that on Monday as to the levels of the different types of services they provide in conjunction with elementaries as well as middle and high.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Which I'm
Dr.
sure we
Allen.
could ask to add, for Dr. Reich to add that portion, or I could share it with us too. But
In K-12, the counselors are really good about including all that data on their program evaluations when that comes around on the cycle.
They will. They'll share that out. And then we also have our outside partners that do our therapy work with our students that get those same calculations. So we have it internally and with our external counseling partners too. But yeah, we will present all of those numbers in our program eval. Yeah.
Anything else?
I do want to, I want to point out, you also have a financial summary. We launched this last month. It just had 1 month of data. So this month's report has July, August, and September. So we're going to continue to report this out each month with updates. And I don't necessarily have anything new to point out this time, but we would certainly answer any questions or respond to any observations that you have. Good. Don't mess with it, right? It's still good. And then on the construction side, we got some feedback from you last time, and so Dr. Gooch followed up with the team there. And so there's kind of there's a progress update at the top and just a lot of photos. You know, with the block going in, that's always the exciting part. you know that for months there's progress happening, but just when those walls go up, then it just really magnifies that this thing's really going to happen. So we would take any questions on either of those two reports. All right, Dr. Gooch, if you could launch our MSBA video.
Welcome to the October edition of the Missouri School Boards Association's Board Report. We begin with a look at filing for the next school board election, which is only a couple months away. There are many things districts can do between now and the start of filing to prepare. MSBA's Director of Board Development, Catherine Whitaker, says that this is a great time to start communicating with the community about the upcoming election process.
So candidate filing doesn't open until December. So you have technically 2 months to let your community know that you do have an opening on the school board potentially. You have time to let them know what it looks like to be a school board member, what does it mean to file, how do you file, and just to give them information about your school district in general. We've created a presentation that superintendents, board presidents can use to inform the community about their school district as a whole, and then also about what it means to be a school board member.
Whitaker also says that MSBA has numerous resources to help potential school board candidates from filing to election.
So on our website, we have a ton of information, some written by lawyers so that they know how to appropriately file and run a campaign, but some written by us, just again, trying to outline what does it look like to be a school board member, what does it feel like to be a school board member, what are your responsibilities. So we've created a module for candidates that school districts can sign up for and then give the login information to those candidates so they can go in and have a better understanding of, now that you're a candidate and you filed, what does it look like to be a school board member. It's interactive, gives a lot of information about the state and what it means to be a school board member.
Visit the MSBA website for all of the resources and training modules available to school boards and potential candidates. The start of the next legislative session is also just around the corner. MSBA's Director of Governmental Relations, Brant Shields, says that the upcoming Fall Delegate Assembly is the chance to have your voice heard on issues surrounding public education as we head toward the next legislative session.
Coming up later this fall is our Fall Delegate Assembly, held on the Friday of annual conference. This is an important opportunity to have your district's voice heard in setting education policy for the state of Missouri. Every member of MSBA is guaranteed at least one delegate in our assembly. Now is a great time to make sure that your delegate's contact information is up to date with MSBA, so they receive the latest news and information for the delegate assembly. As we said earlier, legislative session is just around the corner, beginning Wednesday, January 3rd. Make sure you are signed up for MSBA's Legislative Voice newsletter, published weekly during session, for the latest information and advocacy actions to help you advocate for your students in Jefferson City. As elected officials, your voice is crucial for MSBA to succeed in our legislative goals for the benefit of our students.
And as Brant said, the Fall Delegate Assembly will be held during the Friday of annual conference. If you haven't registered for the conference yet, it's not too late. The 2023 MSBA Annual Conference, in cooperation with the Missouri Association of School Administrators and the Missouri Association of School Business Officials, will be held November 2nd through the 4th in Kansas City. The event will once again feature numerous breakout sessions and workshops, many presented by school leaders from districts throughout the state, along with a great lineup of general session speakers. The conference will also feature the Education Expo, the Student Showcase, and much more. Visit the MSBA website for more information. That's it for this month. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and we'll see you in November for the next MSBA Board Report.
So that takes us to unfinished business, and the only thing we had was the Belcher Scholarship nominee. Just before we talk about who, Dr. Willie, would you kind of explain to our audience what that means?
Yeah, so MSBA, through they have their foundation, Future Builders, I think is their foundation. And so they put out and promote this as a statewide venture every year. So every participating board submits a nominee, and then we are in a region, so that nominee will compete with other nominees from within our region. the winner at the region level will get a certain amount of scholarship, and then we'll go on to compete for the state level Belcher Scholarship, and they get even more money. What our board has traditionally done, they reserve the right to do it or not do it, but the nominee that we send forward is not actually being awarded a scholarship as a result of tonight's actions, but the board likes to consider their application for Belcher as an application for a board scholarship that would be issued later in the spring. So whether the person you name tonight advances and wins scholarship or not, you still could issue this individual a scholarship later in the spring.
Okay. So Dr. Taylor and Sarah and I went over the applications. We had 4 this year. And of course, all the kids are deserving and you wish you could give them all some money, but after some discussion and back and forth on, what we thought about each application, and what they do is they submit their grades, their extracurricular, they write an essay, they talk about what they want to do in life and those kinds of things, why they want to go to college. We decided to offer the scholarship or offer the name forward of Mia Simmons. So Mia will be our representative for the Belcher. Any additional questions or comments? Julie? Sarah? Yeah. So at that point, I'd ask for a motion to approve Mia Simmons as the board's nominee
So
for the John
moved.
Belcher Scholarship. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Takes us to board policies.
Very good. We have 4 policies that we bring back for a second reading tonight. And we did take time in our first read to discuss each of the 4, especially the first one, IIAC. And so we do want to revisit instructional media centers, school libraries, policy language. And now that everybody's had a chance to think about it, read the policy, just have any discussion or do our best to see if there's any consensus on any further revisions that might be needed moving forward.
And the one that's kind of working through this with Dr. Welly.
Yeah.
Have any additional?
So I have been making some modifications. They're not complete yet. So hopefully by the next workshop, we'll have, or I'll have something that I've kind of put together and everybody can look through and review, but I don't have anything additional to add today.
Does anybody else have anything on that or any of the policies for discussion for tonight?
So I want to piggyback off of Mr. Porter's comments. So what we'll do in anticipation that we're going to have discussion next time about possible revisions is that we will bring IIAC back for information and discussion again. And the other 3 we will likely bring back as action items.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the end of our agenda for tonight.
Mr. Williams has a motion.
I make a motion to go into executive session as authorized about the provisions of section 610.021, numbers 3 and 13 of the revised statutes of Missouri.
So I'd ask for a second.
Second.
Sarah?
Yes.
Jeff? Yes. Any yes? Jeff? Jason?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Okay. So we're in executive session. Appreciate everybody coming and spending time with us.
One step at a time.